Yeah, I know I'm not Russell Westbrook, sorry to disappoint you, but I did recently get to see him play in one of the first NBA games to allow fans since the pandemic began. Based on individual state regulations, the NBA has started allowing fans back into some of their games with limitations and restrictions, and I recently got to attend one of those games in Washington, D.C. It was weird in a lot of ways, but it was also really nice. Hi everybody, I'm foXnoMad, and today I want to help you travel smarter by showing you what the experience of attending an NBA game, one of the first NBA games to allow fans back since the pandemic began, was like. But first, some context. Way back on March 11, 2020, the NBA suspended the remainder of the last season, which led to the NBA bubble in Orlando, an isolation zone where the remaining games for 22 teams, playoffs, then finals were played. When all was said and done, the NBA bubble ended up being a huge success since none of the teams reported any cases of COVID-19 during their time in the bubble, which is impressive. At the start of the 2020-21 season though, games resumed in stadiums but without any fans. Well, no actual fans in stadiums. There were virtual screens being added by some teams and fake cheers being pumped into stadiums at other locations, but the stadiums mostly looked like this, completely empty with their seats covered up. But with vaccination levels increasing, many states and the District of Columbia have begun easing their pandemic restrictions, and for the Washington Wizards, that means they can now have 2,100 fans at Capital One Arena, which is about 10% of the total capacity of 20,362 people. Being so limited in seats, finding tickets wasn't quite easy. First of all, a number of them are already reserved for season ticket holders, so you're pretty much limited to the upper 400 level sections if you can get tickets at all. And the tickets that are on sale are for regular prices. They're not marked up because they're limited, so good move on you, Wizards. Now, I've been to a lot of NBA games, but this event wasn't like any I had experienced before. First of all, the metro leading to Capital One Arena was pretty empty. No packed train cars full of rush hour commuters or groups of people wearing red, white, and blue Wizards gear. I mean, just take a look at how empty the corridors and escalators are at 5:45 p.m. on a weekday. Whether you've been to Washington, D.C. before at rush hour or not, this is surreal for most major metropolises. Outside the arena, there weren't too many lines. Even at peak hour, it took less than 5 minutes to get through the door. And a big part of that was probably because fans were sent messages giving them instructions on a specific entrance to use depending on where you were sitting. Walking up to security, there were social distancing reminders, and people were generally good about giving like 3, not 6 feet of distancing. You weren't supposed to bring bags, pretty standard, or purses, not standard, but staff weren't too strict on the purse rule. And as you walked up to get your ticket scanned, you were instructed to read this sign of questions asking whether you've had, have, or have been around someone with COVID-19 symptoms recently. After getting your verbal confirmation, you're directed to get to your seats. And staff were pretty good about enforcing social distancing, at least in the beginning. So on the escalators, they were enforcing a 6-foot rule between groups of people, but as it got closer to game time, that became less and less strict because they had to get more and more people up the escalators, because otherwise there were just going to be crowds of people waiting for the escalator. So they kind of had to speed things up, and there was a little bit less distancing, but more distancing than an NBA game pre-pandemic because there were just a lot less people in the stadium. Getting to your seats, the staff were more careful though to direct you to exactly where you need to go, so you didn't end up walking past people when you didn't have to. I gotta admit, it was pretty nice having an entire row to yourself and a lot less people in front of you. It made the 400 level experience so much more tolerable. It wasn't as hot and stuffy, and there weren't people walking all over you, and your view of the court wasn't blocked by thousands of heads ahead of you. You were required to wear a mask the entire time, covering your nose and your mouth, and if you didn't, there was staff walking around with these red stop signs in their hands, and they would just warn you. They would warn people who would take their masks off. The only time you were allowed to take your mask off is when you were actively eating or drinking something, but otherwise you were required to cover your mouth and your nose with the mask. And if you didn't, the staff were on top of it, like instantly on top of it. And it took most of the first quarter for the staff to kind of get people to follow the rules. But after that, people were more or less compliant, and it was a lot less work for this staff member. The basketball aspect and the game itself weren't much different from an NBA game from like a year and a half ago, aside from the fact that the players had more space around the court to break their falls or jump for loose balls. That extra space around the court, though, I think did improve gameplay because it allowed the players to have more space. So you noticed that they were diving more for loose balls. It was a faster game, if you can believe that, in today's NBA. And you didn't have to worry about cameramen being smashed or players getting injured because they were falling over. Journalists were right up on the court. So I think it improved the gameplay. But everything around the court, everything around the game, though, was definitely a reminder that we are still in a pandemic. The starting lineup introductions were pretty standard, a little lower key, but during the timeouts, there wasn't the usual quick entertainment routine or cheerleaders dancing. The court remained empty, so what they decided to do was alternate between virtual shows, literally just replaying recorded acts from games a season or two ago, and isolated live broadcasts. Cheerleaders, there were only like 3 or 4 at a time, were set up in their own separate stage or behind a DJ booth. There was no halftime show to miss, but even if there were, the hallways, concession stands, and bathrooms were all empty. It was a bit like having the stadium all to yourself. Now, before the game, fans were sent a few confusing messages about how long concessions would be open and what would be offered. Basically, they had mentioned that the concession stands would close at the end of the second quarter, although they did remain a little bit into halftime, so you could still use the concession stands if you wanted to get something to eat or drink. And there was another note here about pre-packaged food items, which is basically just marketing talk for boxes. Essentially, all the food that you would get at a typical Wizards game, like chicken tenders or French fries, all that stuff was still available, but instead of being in an open paper tray like as it would be before the pandemic, it was now in a box. So basically just a box. I don't know if that stops the spread of COVID or if it helps that in any way, but it definitely makes managing spills a lot easier. And so I guess that's an improvement. But as far as what you can get and the food that's being offered at a game, it's pretty much what you would get pre-pandemic. My take on all those messages is they're a little bit misleading because it makes it seem like there's no food or drinks that are really going to be offered. You're going to be very limited. You're not going to be able to walk around the hallways or easily go to the bathroom. But as far as an NBA game goes, you can pretty much do everything you could before the pandemic. It's pretty much the same, except this time with a lot less people and masks. You could get up to go to the bathroom or grab a drink whenever you wanted. You could do some merch shopping too in between quarters or during the game. All pretty standard stuff. It was just a lot less crowded. One thing I'll note though is that 2,100 people in a stadium that can hold about 21,000 people is still a lot of people that can make a lot of noise. So Wizards and Capital One Arena management, I don't think you need to pump in that fake crowd noise, the fake boos. Believe me, it was loud enough in the stadium, especially when Russell Westbrook hit another record-breaking triple-double. That was pretty amazing. I think the stadium got really loud, and I think having the fake boos and cheers kind of takes away from the actual fan experience, and it kind of almost drowns out the sound that the fans, the actual people who are there, are making. So I would just scrap all of that. Overall, attending a pandemic-era NBA game was a lot of fun and a nice step toward normalcy. Was a lot less crowded. There was more space around you in the seats, no lines in the bathrooms. I think I could get used to that, but I don't think we're going to get a chance to. It seems like restrictions will continue to be eased over time, so if you can get tickets to a pandemic-era NBA game, I would recommend it, both for the game itself, but also the spectacle of what could be a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Thanks for watching this look into one of the first NBA games to allow fans back into stadiums. Let me know if you have any questions down in the comments below. And while you're down there, hit the like and subscribe buttons. I'll have new videos for you every week, and I'll see you in the next video. Can we just talk about Russell Westbrook? Like, what is happening? Like, this is a historic run. I mean, how does a point guard get 20 rebounds in a game? How does a point guard get 10 rebounds, like just averaging? He's the 10th highest rebounder in the NBA. He's a point guard. That's insane. He's already, as of the time that I'm recording this, not even the time that you're watching this, at the time you're recording this, averaging a triple-double for the season. Even if he did nothing from here on out in the remaining 8 games or 7 games or whatever is left, he would be averaging a triple-double. That is crazy. That's nuts. Historic run. I know he gets a lot of hate, but it's definitely worth watching if you haven't been checking them out. Take a look at some of these Wizards games because I don't think this is gonna happen. I think this might also be a once in a generation type of thing. So check it out. Good on you. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.